All right, so some of you, if you've searched the interwebs, you will come up with an acronym IIYFM, right? IIYFM, if it fits your macros. So what does that all mean, right? So macros, right? When we think about macros, are 3 major macronutrients: protein, carbs, and fats, based upon your BMR and your activity and a few other factors.
What is BMR?
Basal metabolic rate.
And what is that?
For those of you that come into the gym and do a body comp, it gives you your BMR right at the bottom, right there.
Oh, I think that one says 1485.
That's right. So your BMR, basal metabolic rate, it's basically how many calories you burn if you were to lie in a bed all day long for 24 hours. Breathing, blood pumping around your body, but you're not really doing any activity. You're not moving,
I mean,
right?
some
Just
digestion
keeping
is
you alive.
included in that as well. Because when you're laying, if you ate the day before, you're going to digest.
Right. So just like bodily function, right? So not any extra expenditure with respect to activity, right? So then we start to add in, we use some formulas and we start to add in like, all right, do you have a sedentary job? Do you have a moderate job? Do you have a vigorous activity job? How much exercise do you typically do? So what your calories are. So we basically figure out, right, how many calories you are burning as an estimate in any given day, right? And then based upon that, and also based upon your muscle mass and your lean mass, we figure out how many grams of carbs, how many grams of protein, how many grams of fat that you should be consuming on a particular day. So how you get those carbs and proteins and fats, if it's in true IIFYM, right? If it's FYM, yep. IIFYM. If it fits your macros, people that follow that methodology do not typically care about quality, right? It just all comes down to, did I get my numbers? Did I hit my numbers, or did I stay within my number range? Right?
Which means Diet Coke is 100% acceptable because there's no calories. It's nothing. Right.
So it's a pretty effective strategy, right? From just like a result standpoint, as far as weight loss goes, because I think number one, it's awareness, right? You're hyper paying attention to what you're eating. And when we hyper pay attention to anything, we do better at it. And then you're not overeating.
I agree.
But from like a health standpoint, like, yeah, I mean, you could do, if it fits your macros, and eat ice cream and cookies and like make it work. It's not a lot of like volume that you're going to get, but like it'll work.
It totally works. It's not that I don't use macro counting and like for some of my one-on-one clients and try and get them some ratios, like, and we want it to fit your macros. But I also am a big believer is which priority is more important, food quality or macro counting? And I would always go I personally am a huge food quality person.
A lot of things in food that don't necessarily show up in like macronutrients, right? Things like phytochemicals, like antioxidants, all of these other things, and potentially even stuff we don't even know about food and its interaction with our body that we just have yet to figure out. And so, yeah, and I would agree with you as far as like, if we have someone brand new just jumping into macro counting, a good solution for them? Probably not, because there is definitely a level of experience that you need to do it right and to do it well. Because to truly track macros, you need to either be reading every label, right? And we even know that labels are not accurate in their actual measurements. But you also need to be like weighing your food, right? Because when I eat
measuring it.
Right. Yeah, either or, right? It's in a cup or it's on a scale. And so like chicken, right? Like when I buy chicken from the store, like chicken doesn't have a nutritional label. And if I eat 4 ounces of chicken versus 6 ounces of chicken, that's a different caloric load, right? There's more protein in 6 ounces than 4 ounces. So I need to know, is this 4 ounces or 6 ounces? And honestly, like if I had a bunch of chickens in front of me and they're all different sizes, like 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6. I don't know. I'd be curious to see how accurate I could pick the right ones out. Like you could probably just like put them in order, and like here's the smallest, the biggest.
But it depends how it's laid on the plate. And I mean, we do a lot of like protein portion size. So like for a female, there's my camera. It should be the size of my palm. But is that 4 ounces? Is that 3 ounces? Like where you're getting an idea of how much quantity you should eat. But my goal is 4 ounces at every meal, but I'm using my palm as a thing, and it's really only 3 ounces. I'm really a whole ounce short of
Which
how
is
much I should be eating.
25% short, right? If we look at it like significantly, right? And so for a lot of people, like it's a lot of work, right? It ends up becoming a lot of work. And it's typically not a good long-term solution because it's a lot of work. Yes, you get better at estimating. So I think there is some value in, hey, this week I'm going to weigh everything I eat. I'm going to put everything into a tracker just to get a general awareness of like, all right, a cup of rice. Hey, what does that look like? Right? How many
way
calories
less than you
is
ever
that?
want it to be.
Right. Like what does it actually look like on my plate? What is it when I put it into a calorie counter? Like how many grams is that? How many calories is that? Or how many grams of carbs is that? I think it's a good strategy to help with awareness. But as far as a long-time approach or a long-term approach, I don't know. I think it also kind of sets you up for it sets you up for some not very good mental associations with food.
So if it fits your macros is used very, very commonly in the bodybuilding world. Like it's not like if you want to eat ice cream, you're figuring out how to eat ice cream and everything you have to give up to eat ice cream because you want it. Like so I see it a lot there, and there's a lot of distorted eating in the bodybuilding world. And I'm not saying that every person that does bodybuilding or bikini or competes in that sense has a problem, but I've seen a lot of people have a huge issue. It leads to like after shows. I remember I've seen people eat entire packages of cookies and candy and all this kind of stuff to where they make themselves sick, and then they gain a whole bunch of weight back only to have to do another show in 5 months and have to cut it all back out. I think you can see it being really hard on your body. And for women, because of usually how it's done, I see a lot of, one, it's just emotionally hard, but it's usually, for the most people, I see them on really, really low fat. Like the fat is really, really low. So you can see a lot of hormone issues come in for women as well.
Right. When we say if it fits your macros, we can adjust the macros to kind of be whatever we want them to be. So if we need something to be higher or lower, and it's really when you're trying to dial things in, right? You're trying to get that when we think about bodybuilding, bikini, any of those competitions where physique is the most important thing to get.
We're not even talking about being 1% better. You're talking about being half of a percent leaner than that. Like it's very small amounts. But I think like also thinking what kind of macronutrient breakdown are you trying to get? Are you trying to be at 1,600 calories a day? And then here are your macros to fit that, like 40% from fat and then 30% protein, 30% carbs, like is a basic starting point. But like, where are you exactly? And like making those adjustments to make it fit.
Right. So when you're trying to figure out, let's say you are doing macros for someone, what's the first thing you figure out?
Protein.
Would you go calories first? That was kind of like
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Protein. Only because I want to make if I can't get them the right amount of protein or what, like depending on percentages, I usually figure out protein, and then from there I figure out fats and carbs, and then I have a calorie total. Because for most of the time for me, I'm not worried about what the end calorie amount is, because as long as it's over a certain number, and for every person I kind of have an idea of where I want them in calorie range. Like if you're eating 1,200 calories or less a day, just know that if I'm doing calorie and we're thinking about calories and where we're trying to get you, I'm probably going to try and get you up to at least 1,600 calories a day. Because even if 1,600 is too much, it gives me a lot of room to lower you little by little to find that happy place. Whereas at 1,200 calories, unless we're doing like a carb cycling and we're cutting carbs and not trying to increase fats, like there's not a lot of room to go lower at 1200 calories.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely something to be said about cycling things. And so, yeah, I might have some low calorie days, or I may have a 1,000 calorie day or 1,200 calorie day, but that is not the norm for every day. But then I'm also up at 1,600, 1,800 other days. That I think, in my experience, the body is much happier with that than trying to always be low cal all the time.
Yeah.
And
So what do you
know,
start with? What's
calories.
the first thing you would calculate out for someone?
Calories. Like you have your range, right? Like, so I need to know, like, is this based upon everything? Like, what is everything going to total up to be? Because from there you can start to figure. And protein really isn't dependent on calories at all, right? Like protein is dependent on weight or muscle mass, whatever you're using, right?
And
so that's your first. I mean, that's the number, and then fats and carbs
has to fit around that.
Yeah, so like the protein takes out the first chunk, right? The chunk of those calories.
And I like to give people a protein number because maybe we're going to build into macro counting, or we're going to build into like figuring out where we are. If they can't hit their protein numbers, it doesn't matter what the other numbers are. And that's why maybe I would do it first, is because it wouldn't be like, here, now we're going to measure every single thing and weigh every single thing. We're just going to measure and weigh protein. Let's see where we're at for protein every day for a week and kind of get an average. Okay, are we hitting the number that I think you need to be at, or are we having a hard miss? Well, we're having a hard miss. Okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is what we're going to do on this day, and this is what we're going to, and build that, because I don't want them making up extra calories if we're still not getting enough protein. So I would always, so I just, protein always seems easy. It's an easy counting starting point. It's not counting everything. It's counting one thing.
Right. So I think I think you said something important there. Like if you were going to start this, just starting with tracking my protein would be a good first step. And that would probably get you 75% of the way, right? If that was the only thing and you hit that number consistently, you would probably see some consistent results, especially if you're training fairly intensely. That will help with the recovery process there. So yeah, I mean, I guess if you take anything out of this, what we're talking about today is tracking can be important at times. It can be a good strategy to drive more awareness, right? So let's not confuse that the tracking is what's being successful. It's awareness, right? So awareness can come in a lot of different ways, but tracking can be one way to drive more awareness. And if you want to get started, like start with just protein. Like just start there. Don't start with carbs. Start with protein. Hit your protein numbers first, and then from there we can start to look at carbs and those kind of things. And so those are just some things to think about. Here's one.
And also, for the beginner, if you are a beginner and you are just starting, like you don't have to count or weigh or measure anything. Like that is, not to throw fire out there, but like that's. Like when we do our group fire classes, this is exactly what we do. We start you not talking about food. We talk about the habits that surround our food choices, because as much as what you eat is important and how much of it you eat, but if you don't have the habits to be successful to make those choices or make those choices better, you're not going to be successful in the long term. So like that is why, like if you're a beginner and you're just starting, don't count and don't weigh and don't measure. Just, can you get all the processed food out of your refrigerator, or can you get all the processed food out of your pantry? Those are going to be a better place to start. And are you getting good quality sleep at night? And like those are better places to start than like, I'm going to weigh and measure everything that I do. But then if you're hungry because you're doing this and you're only eating 1,300 calories a day, and you come home and you're starving and you open the pantry and there's chips in there, you're going to eat the chips. Like,
right.
So,
and
like, go ahead.
I was going to say the other challenge with if it fits your macros is you typically have to eat separate foods, right? You're going to eat a protein, you're going to eat a carb, you're going to eat veggies. You're not going to eat a casserole, or you're not going to eat a stir fry, or you're not or those things will have to be separate and you'll combine them later. One of the challenges with if it fits your macros is we need to have specific foods. We can't have like a goulash or any sort of like combination, because like how do you track that? Like because it's carbs and protein, and
you make individual servings of all of those things,
right? Which to me personally is like punch me in the face.
It is. So you eat really, really plain. So like that's why you see a lot of like bodybuilders eating like super plain, like asparagus, brown rice, grilled chicken. The end, because that's very, very easy to count and very easy to track.
Right.
But can you take all of those things and turn it into more of a like a hash or like a stir fry type thing? You can. Just it's not that easy. And then also, all of those things have like sauces and condiments that like they don't they make everything taste better, but they are added calories when you're trying to be like compete at a high level in physique that you don't want to waste on soy sauce.
Right.
Like in those, we're not talking about a ton of calories either. We're talking about like 30 calories that you don't want to waste to put soy sauce on something, because that's like another couple bites of something else.
Right. So as if you're listening to this, you could probably see how this can create distorted eating with people when you're trying to decide whether or not you should put soy sauce on your rice.
Well,
like,
and I think it's also like why people think eating healthy is so terrible and so awful. Well, when you've seen people eat like that, it's like, yeah, that sounds awful and terrible. But let me tell everyone, that is not how either of us are eating at our houses when we're making food that's what we would say healthy.
Right. So Candace said, is there a thing as too much protein? So I'm going to lean towards no, as long as you don't have some sort of like disorder that you can't process, like you have like a kidney disorder or something where having excess. And if it's in the unprocessed state, I think I should say that as well. Because if we were to just do shakes, you could load protein, right? Like if you were doing meal replacements and weight gainers and yada, 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 you could probably overdo protein. But if you're doing like chicken breast, like you just can't eat enough. Like you get to a point where it's like, I don't want any more food. And so it's really hard to do it. And protein is really metabolically active, meaning that like it just burn a ton of calories eating it. So yeah, I don't know.
I agree.
How would you have a camp you can't overeat unless it's processed?
I think you can overeat protein, but I think it's really, really hard to do it, only because based on a lot of the numbers that I would pull for someone for protein, I don't, in all of my years of working with clients in the nutrition space, I have never had a client hitting the protein numbers that I would even recommend to them. And they would tell me they already eat too much protein.
Right.
So, I mean, I have a hard time eating the protein numbers that I should be hitting.
Right. So most people underconsume.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Most people definitely underconsume protein. I think it's very, if you overconsume protein, like it's pretty rare. And so, yeah, most people, if we looked at your stuff, it'd be like, yes, we need some more protein. And so Peggy just wrote in, how come from time to time I don't want any meat? That's interesting, to have a food aversion like that.
Protein digestion as we age, because the amount of stomach acid we have decreases. So your ability to break down protein becomes harder. And it's very, very common as we age. So I'm not surprised by it. But I would start talking like, how are you cooking your food? Are you like using your other senses to make yourself want this? Or are you just eating boiled chicken? You know, I think there's ways to make things sound and taste better. I don't know what we're doing right now.
I'm losing power, so I need to go closer to a source of power.
Trevor's gonna die. Okay. So I really think it's you know, could you work on your protein, your ability to absorb protein and break it down, and would it help with your aversion to protein?
Yeah, and I mean, could it be and I'm just hypothesizing here, but could it be a low HCl content in your stomach, where you're not, starting that breakdown process?
Which I 100% agree with that. That's why, like, huge on like when you're making the food, like, be present in the kitchen while you're cooking it. Like, smell it, like, touch it, like, get it ready to go. Take the time, take extra time. So like, I would almost get like a whole chicken and then have to stuff it and have to like baste the outsides and like make it a longer process where like you have more of like, I'm looking forward to this, and there's a build up to the meal, not just I took the chicken nuggets out of the freezer and I tossed them in the microwave and then I'm going to eat them.
Right. I mean, I think there's something to that. I just ain't got time for that. So
you don't, but you're going to prep it. And when's the last time you had an aversion to protein?
No, I need more protein. That's what I need. So,
I mean, but for a lot of people, men and women, that's why we see a lot of people that are older have a lot of heartburn. Is you actually usually don't have a lot of heartburn because you have too much stomach acid. It's usually because it's too low and your food isn't breaking down. So when you go to let more stuff in and you get acid reflux, it's because your stomach is too full and it's not breaking down and going to the next process because there's not enough stomach acid to break everything down, which is really, really crazy to tell people. And there's a whole book on stomach acid that I read. If anyone wants to read it, it's disgusting. And you don't want to know what's happening to your food when that happens. It's really gross. But an HCl supplement works really good. Sometimes bile salts help people with that situation too. There's some different supplementing you can do.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you kind of glossed over pretty quickly that it's worth re-mentioning is as you age, your ability to break down protein decreases, which means you need more protein as you age. And so that's why some of our older clients, we suggest that they do like a protein shake midday because they just at their meals, they can't physically eat enough. The volume is too much. And so doing something like a shake midday, whether it's whey, if you don't have an aversion to milk or a plant-based protein.
I love protein powder and coffee. I mean, most people are having a cup of coffee and it's not anything extra that they're doing because they're already going to have it. So can you mix your protein powder in with your coffee and like blend it up so it mixes well? And you can do that with hot coffee or cold coffee. And I mean, you can always go with like a collagen peptides that's just going to dissolve completely in it. And it's going to be part of what you're drinking.
Right. So yeah, I mean, those are just some ways. If you are getting a little bit older, it's worth probably adding in, a little shake midday of just 20 to 30 grams of protein to get you closer to those numbers. Because most people, if you are, let's say, eating 3 meals a day, like most females should be hitting like 20 to 30 grams per meal, right? And most males should probably be 40 to 60 grams per meal. And so, like for me, I only eat typically 2 meals a day. And so now I'm talking like 80, right? Like, and that's a lot of protein in one meal, right?
Let me tell you, that's like barely what a lot of women are getting in a day. Barely.
Right.
What you're eating in one meal.
Right. So, I mean, these are just things to think about, right? Because what's the number? Is it 0.7? 0.7 per gram per pound?
Per pound of muscle mass.
Yeah. So just to like give you some context, I am about 190.
No, body weight.
Yeah, body weight.
0.7 for body weight, and it's like, if you go off of muscle mass, it's double. So like if your muscle mass is 55 pounds, you should be eating 110 grams of protein.
Yeah, so I'm like between 130 and 140, right? So that's like 60 to 70 a meal, which is a fair amount of protein. I probably don't get that, so I do some amino.
But also, if you did, would your ability to put on muscle mass be a little bit better?
Oh, 100%, right?
But you have a body type that it's harder to put muscle mass on anyway. So like, how would you do that? You would have to hit your protein numbers. Like if that was your goal, you would want to be hitting them so you could get the gains that you're looking to get. The gains, 100%. Did you like that?
Get those gains.
Oh man.
All right, I think that's good. So to just kind of recap, if it fits your macros, can be a strategy that can work. For some people, I wouldn't suggest it as a first strategy. It's many times an advanced strategy. It can be a great strategy for just understanding awareness about what you're doing and how many calories are in things and like what should my portions be. So it can be a great short-term strategy to just teach you some stuff, but you got to stick to it as well. And you do have to weigh stuff or measure stuff, everything that you do, so you have a good idea. So you got to make sure that you're not like have a crazy week of traveling and try and like do it all at the same time, right?